Good evening, everyone. My name is Alta Lynn Price, and along with Arnie Bernstein, I am your local co-ambassador of the Chicago Regional Chapter of the National Authors Guild, which many of you, but perhaps not all of you, because we have some guests tonight, will know, was founded in 1912. So for well over a century has been advocating for author rights, dealing with a lot of issues of copyright. One of the main benefits of being a member is that they have an entire legal department that can help vet contracts. It's a general, support group. We have everything from children's book authors, illustrated book authors, nonfiction, fiction, you name it. We have some poets in here. So it's a really great, diverse group. And tonight is our spring reading, an open mic night. I'm really thrilled that we have 4 featured readers. We have some students along. We have some guests from, I believe, around the country. So we're going to have the featured readers first, followed by the open mic section. Some of you wrote to me to voice your interest. If you're deciding on the spot now that you would like to share, go ahead and use the raise your hand function. Again, after the main readers, and we'll be happy to have you contribute. So just to give you a little background, I myself am a translator. I got into the Authors Guild from PEN America, which has a translation committee. And I learned that the Authors Guild does all this advocacy work on behalf of writers. So we also have a translators group, Authors Guild has been really instrumental for me since I only moved to Chicago from New York about 2 years ago. I knew very few people, and I've met some really amazing writers through it. So this is actually my 8th event here in town with my co-ambassador, Arnie Bernstein. I want to give you a little recap of the events that we've had so far, and then I'll pass the mic over to Arnie so that he can tell you a little bit more about the real member benefits and the advocacy nationally that the Authors Guild is doing. So we launched this chapter in June of 2018 with a meet and greet at Red Lion Pub. That December, I met several of you actually there, so it's wonderful to have you along tonight. That December, we had our holiday reading and party at the American Writers Museum. Scott Turow, James Finn Garner, and Rebecca Mackay read that evening. In February of 2019, we had our first winter open mic night reading with poet Valerie Wallace, novelist Nami Moon, novelist David J. Collins, and novelist Amy Timberlake. We followed that up with a presentation. We're also partnering as much as possible with local other writers groups and institutions. So Arnie presented the Authors Guild local chapter at Sousa, or Sunday Salon, which many of you might have attended over the years. That summer, in July of 2019, we had Summer Stories with Kali Ohm, Simon Smith, Anka Shilagi, and Sandy Weisenberg. In April of 2000, sorry, I'm going out of order. No, it was that fall. We had a legal panel at Next Door Chicago, where Marcy Walker, Steve Barron, and Charles Grippo covered a lot of issues, including copyright protection and infringement, book piracy on the internet, a perennial issue, fair use issues, libel issues, and they had a good discussion of the CASE Act. That December, last December, we had another holiday reading at the American Writers Museum with Gina Frangello, Augustus Rose, and Michelle Falkoff. That brings us to tonight. We're having our featured reading. We called it Spring Strangeness just because it's spring. It's strange. I would have been in New York for a literary festival called themed Turn and Face the Strange. And of course, none of us knew how apt that would become. And they had to postpone that festival. So I'm actually happy that it freed me up to do this tonight. And Arnie and I, looking forward into the future, even though none of us knows what it's going to bring, Arnie and I are hoping to have an event at the next Printers Row Lit Fest. So with that, Arnie, I will pass the baton to you to say a little bit more about what the Authors Guild does, and then I will introduce our first reader.
Okay. And you'll forgive me for reading. Yeah, it is the Authors Guild is the nation's oldest and largest professional organization of writers, all across genres, founded in 1912. Lots and lots of benefits, and it's really cheap. If you're a member, you know how inexpensive it is. And best of all is the legal advice, reading of contracts, and other issues. That alone is worth price of admission, and I can vouch for that myself. I've used the legal services on several occasions. They're good and they're quick. There's the Fair Contract Initiative. We get screwed all the time. So it's, they have the model contract online. You can access it. There's various seminars, including marketing webinars, things like that. And I think they're going to be doing more of them as we're discovering how great this is. Website hosting, email service with great tech support. I have my website through the Authors Guild, and the tech support is fantastic. It's really easy to make them too. It's I'm total. I don't know how to design a website, but I do now thanks to their very easy templates. So I would encourage you, if you want to take control of your website and you don't want a lot of bells and whistles, it's really a great way to go. There's a wonderful, wonderful resource library, info on publishing contracts, self-publishing, managing your finances, estate planning, tax tips, figuring out accuracy in royalty statements, which can be a Byzantine kind of thing at times. There's the community boards, which are great. Have any of you done the community boards at all? Yeah, oh, they're wonderful. I'm on them all the time. It's a really great way to interact with other members. And yeah, I love them myself. There's the back in print program to get your intellectual property after it goes out of print, to get it back in print on your terms, which is wonderful. If media liability insurance, which we need, we live in a litigious society, and that's, it claims somebody comes liable, somebody can plagiarism, invasion of privacy, copyright infringement, errors, omissions, all that kind of stuff. That can get expensive. And so with the liability insurance, that can be a real lifesaver at times. There's a quarterly bulletin, which you can get either as an e-version or the print version. I like the print version myself because I like just having it and making notes in it. But you can request that, or you can get the e-version. And it keeps you up to date with what's going on nationally with issues and what other members and other are doing across the country. Membership directory online, which is wonderful. You can get yourself listed in there and all the things that you do and connect with other members as well. And then there's discounts, which are great. Supplemental health insurance for dental, things like that. Car rentals, hotels for if we ever go do book tours again. Computers, various, you can get Dell computers at a discount. Magazine subscriptions like Poets and Writers, you can get at a discount. Writing software, Scrivener and Scrapple, I think you can get at a discount from there. And various research sources like JSTOR, things like that. As far as an advocacy group, the Authors Guild has been at the forefront of a lot of stuff. Copyright protection, which is particularly important, all the things that are going on in the web and people just picking your stuff and dropping it wherever they please. First Amendment issues, including censorship and lobbying for the reporters, federal law to shield reporters so that they don't have to go to jail for not, revealing their sources as is their right. The controlled digital lending, in other words, people stealing our stuff and putting it online in a library. I love the Internet Archive, but I hate what they're doing. They've created something called the National Emergency Library, where they're taking people's books and making them available for free without paying, and people can check them out. I found one of my books there. You should check it out, the National Emergency Library. If you find one of your books there, send them a cease and desist email.
Let me jump in, Arnie. I actually
Yes.
shared in the chat, I shared a link to the Authors Guild statement about their open letter to the Internet Archive. And I know it's kind of controversial and some people think, information wants to be free. Our issue with it is it's robbing authors and creators of their livelihoods.
Yeah, so, it's a violation of copyright, and it's
whereas libraries, authors still are able to gain viable income from when their books are in libraries. So that's the difference. And I also shared another link. Arnie, since you mentioned, you know, tours and discounts on travel, and who knows when that'll become a thing again, the Authors Guild very much wants to hear from its members, and we want to hear from you guys in terms of what we can be doing to support authors right now.
Yeah,
A
it's a tough time.
lot of people have had book tours or book launches canceled. Some things are successfully going virtual, but we want to be here for you to support you however we can. So
Yeah.
check the chat in this meeting for some of those links. Okay, go ahead, back to you, Arnie.
Oh, sure. They're also dealing with internet piracy, which another major issue. It's kind of like whack-a-mole to find, you know, finding your books online. A lot of Russian sites too, I've noticed. And a lot of those are just buggy virus kind of places, and they use your book as a way of doing that for free at a price, I suppose. Then they're fighting Amazon, which is wonderful. The anti-competitive initiative that they've been firing at Amazon. I can tell you just from personal experience. I was on NPR, and I thought my book sales were going to do well on Amazon, except when I checked, they were only selling it through third parties. So I lost sales on that. Amazon made the money, and the third parties made the money, and I didn't get a dime. Yeah, it's terrible. And I contacted the Mary Rassenberger and Michael Gross, the attorney at Authors Guild. Within a couple days, Amazon changed it. By then it was too late, of course, for me to make any money off it. But if you find your books are being sold only through third parties and your books are still in print, that shouldn't be happening. And so check that out. Amazon is evil as far as I'm concerned. And then what Alta was talking about, help, the Authors League Fund, which I think a lot of us are going to be looking at. The Authors League Fund provides no interest loans that you don't necessarily have to pay back. It's no secret writers don't make a lot of money. Authors don't make a lot of money. And this money is there in case of an emergency. I mean, we're certainly living in emergency situations now, but I mean, should you fall ill and not be able to, it's not for buying writing time. It's not like a grant, but it's when you need help. It's there for you. And it's a nice thing to donate to during the year too, or think about in your estate planning. I know I'm going to be putting that in my estate planning as well. So that's something you might want to even check out now. There's links to the Authors League Fund on the site. And then Alta covered everything we did locally. There is a Facebook page as well that I run. That I know a lot of you are on that Facebook page, and if you're not, get on it. A lot of information gets exchanged on there. The Authors Guild has their own Facebook page as well, and I cross-post a lot of stuff from there.
That's great, and thank you so much, Arnie. And we'll keep.
Oh, I'm not done. I'm saving the best for the last.
Okay.
In case nobody. I'm just going to brag just a teeny tiny bit. Alta and I were on the Lit 50 last year, the New City Lit 50, for all the advocacy we've been doing on behalf of the Authors Guild, which I think was a really nice tribute to what the Authors Guild does for us, for all of us. And it was nice to see our work recognized for that. And there's students here. I understand there's some students here. If you're a student and you want to join, $35 can't be beat. It's a $30, and it's a really great way to connect with professional authors. If you want to be an author when you grow up, I don't recommend it. But if you want to be an author,
I don't recommend growing up.
Oh, tell me about it. Regular dues are really cheap as it is. But for $35 and you're a student, there's no excuse not to do it. And you'll connect with authors, and you'll connect with other writers, and you'll find yourself in a big, large community. I wish I did something like that when I was in grad school. And it's that. With that said, let's get to the heart of the evening.
Great, thanks so much. So we'll dive right in. And I see Michelle has already shared in the chat section bookshop.org, which lets authors create an affiliate link so that you get 10%, and a local bookstore. I believe it's a local bookstore local to the
Chicago area.
to
Yeah,
the
my local
buyer.
bookstore does that actually. I have a link.
So it's a way, it's
Yeah.
sort of an answer to, it's convenient online shopping if people don't want to go direct to the bookstore, but to get your books out there. So Michelle, with no further ado, I have just unmuted you. Allow me to introduce you. Michelle Wucker got tired of hearing people insist they never saw it coming when so many often do see dangers and sound the alarm. So she coined the term gray rhino to draw attention to the highly probable, high impact risks that everyone hates to admit we neglect. She introduced the concept at the World Economic Forum's 2013 annual meeting in Davos, then developed gray rhino theory into the influential international bestseller, The Gray Rhino: How to Recognize and Act on the Obvious Dangers We Ignore. When China's president mentioned gray rhinos last year, global markets tumbled. Business continuity, central bank, and military planners all use her framework, as do investors and C-suite decision makers. Michelle is a former think tank and media executive who has been recognized as a young global leader of the World Economic Forum and a Guggenheim Fellow, among other honors. More than 2 million people have watched her recent TED Talk on why so many people ignore obvious challenges and how we can do better at acting instead of getting trampled. Find out more about Michelle at thegrayrhino.com. And with that, I will welcome our first reader of this evening.
Hey, thanks, Alta and Arnie, for pulling this all together. I'm so excited and really, happy to see everyone here since I can't see you all in person. So The Gray Rhino came out in 2016, and it was right in the middle of the presidential election. And anyone else who had a book who came out that year knows how much attention books got that year. But it lately has really come into its own. A lot of people have been looking at it as a way to frame what we're going through right now. A magazine in the UK just called it a metaphor for our times. It's really the idea of a big scary thing coming at you and giving you a choice, unlike the elephant in the room, which by definition nobody says or does anything about. And I was very excited yesterday to find out that 9 senators, including 3 former presidential candidates, just sent a letter to the chair of the Federal Reserve telling them that they need to work on making sure that climate change is priced into financial assets. Otherwise, we're going to face another big gray rhino crisis coming at us. And in the finance world and the policy world, people have been talking about gray rhino as really a metaphor for the pandemic, something that people were warned about and never saw coming. But I think you guys probably aren't here to listen to a bunch of finance and policy stuff. So what I wanted to read for you tonight was a much more personal passage about rhinos themselves. I went on safari as part of my research, and my accountant was totally fine with me deducting it from my taxes as a legitimate expense. So I really wanted to read about the inspiration for this metaphor that hopefully is going to start changing more and more people's behavior. The ride will be bumpy. We call it an African massage, said the guide who drove me up the mountain on Mtetomusha Game Preserve at the southern edge of Kruger National Park in northern South Africa, near the border with Mozambique. We were on our way to the lodge where I'd be staying for a safari to see rhinos in the wild. South Africa is home to more than 4 of 5 rhinos left on the planet. It's ground zero of a war to save the rhino from extinction, fighting what feels like a losing battle, as poachers kill 1 rhino roughly every 8 hours for its horn, the weapon that's supposed to help rhinos protect themselves, and which instead has become the reason for their destruction. As the Land Cruiser lurched and growled on its way up the steep slope, my driver stopped and pointed to a spot in the brush where, he said, there was a male kudu, which is a common striped African antelope. I squinted and tried to follow the line of sight from where his index finger was pointing, but I still couldn't make out the outline of the animal. My vision is terrible. You can probably see from the edge of my glasses how thick the lenses are here. But even if it had not been quite so bad, I would still have had a hard time seeing the antelope. As I soon learned, it takes practice to see many of the animals to whom Mother Nature gave the great gift of the ability to camouflage themselves. On my first game drive, a few hours later, as the sun slowly sank in the sky, my eyes gradually grew accustomed to following where our tracker pointed. Those dark dots on the hill were buffaloes. That rustling grass was an antelope. There, on the far edge of the valley to our right, was a herd of 24 or so elephants. The family traveling with us saw the elephants even before our guide did, but it was several minutes before I could pick them out. Panicking slightly at not being able to notice a large group of multi-ton animals, I silently told myself that they had the benefit of having been on safari elsewhere before they arrived at this reserve, and I worried that my eyes were going from bad to worse. Even though I knew that my safari companions' eyes were simply better practiced than mine, I was still relieved when I finally saw the elephants. It was a large group of cows, calves, and young adult males and females. Our guide, Noel, eased the Land Cruiser off the road and turned off the engine. We sat and watched as some groomed and caressed each other, some played, and others pulled down tree branches and leaves to eat. Then, in the middle of the herd, a young male sauntered up to another larger one and challenged him. They unfurled their trunks and grabbed onto each other, then pulled hard until the smaller one gave up and turned away. Then a giant bull, close to twice the size of the largest of the young bulls, took notice and headed towards the young troublemakers, and the whole herd started moving en masse. We backed up the road and continued on our way. 15 minutes or so later, our tracker, Aaron, signaled our guide to stop. He pointed down the hill where another vehicle had gone off-road. Noel furrowed his brow and shook his head in concern. They were heading dangerously close to the large male, tempting fate. Human nature was coming into play in a very dangerous way. Eventually, the bull turned away and Noel breathed a sigh of relief. Over dinner later in the week, I'd hear stories of an elephant bull in musth, the testosterone-saturated aggressive state at the height of the mating cycle, charging another safari vehicle, though the group did escape unscathed. We kept our eyes out for rhinos. Aaron pointed out a rhino wallow, an indentation in the ground where rainwater had accumulated. Rhinos, which cannot sweat, dig wallows and lie down in the mud at the bottom in order to cool off and soothe their skin. It's nearly an inch thick. A rhino's hide may appear tough, but it's still not effective armor against the stinging insects of the bush or against the ravages of the sun. Another sign that rhinos were near was a midden, a large patch of rhino dung trampled and spread around. Rhinos use these group poop spots to mark territory and to communicate with each other. Dung beetles crawled all over the midden, rolling and pushing along tiny rhino poop balls while fending off other dung beetles that were trying to steal the orbs. It was silly to think that each beetle couldn't just roll its own ball, since there was more than enough material to go around. Rhinos produce as much as 50 pounds of dung a day. But if I have learned anything while researching this book, it is that behaviors don't always make obvious sense. Apparently that goes for dung beetles too. Just after sunset, when the light hadn't yet completely left the sky, we heard and saw rustling in the tall grasses off the road. We drove closer, and there they were in the brush. 3 white rhinos, which are bigger, wider lipped, more common, far less elusive, and more social among themselves than black rhinos, which tend to be solitary. And just as a note, the gray in the gray rhino metaphor comes from the fact that 2 of the 5 rhino species are white and black, but neither one is actually white or black. They're both gray, but even though all rhinos are gray, there's no official color for what they are. So it really enforces this metaphor for obvious things that we don't pay attention to. These rhinos' horns were blunt, having been cut in order to discourage poachers. As our vehicle approached, the rhino trio ambled off into the dusk. Though brief and dim, this was my first sighting of rhinos in the wild, but I saw very few in the next few days and was starting to give up. On my last evening back at the game reserve, the drive yielded lots of zebras, which by many accounts are more closely related to the rhino than elephants are. Yet I still hadn't experienced what I'd come to South Africa for, an opportunity to see rhinos up close. As the sun dropped behind the mountains and the darkness closed in, I resigned myself to the likely reality that what I'd seen so far was the best I could do. I was lucky to have seen as many rhinos as I had, even fleetingly and from afar. If the rhino situation did not reverse direction dramatically, soon people would no longer be able to see them in the wild at all. And then Noel stopped the Land Cruiser and cut the engine. And I'm about to show you what we saw as I read. This is coming up. Here it goes. Aaron pointed ahead of us to our left. A crash, the zoologically correct word for a group of rhinos, were gathered under some trees at the edge of the clearing. As our vehicle inched closer, a few of them turned around and disappeared under the trees. But 3 stayed and gazed at us as we watched back as much as we could in the deepening darkness. A large cow was lying on the ground with her back to us. She didn't seem to be the least bit bothered by our presence or by the light that Aaron was shining on her back. 2 rhinos watched from the background. Eventually, the cow stood up and shook off some debris, then turned around and ambled under a tree to the left. She stood there for a few moments. We could hear her shuffling, but we couldn't see her. One of the other rhinos had disappeared, but the remaining one, a large bull, approached the tree where the cow was hidden. With what we supposed were amorous intentions, he followed her as she disappeared into the dark behind the tree. What struck me most was how peaceful the interaction was. A rhino cow so unperturbed by us that she didn't bother to immediately curtail her nap. A bull intent on courting her and utterly nonplussed by our presence. It was sobering to think that the next generation of humans might not have the chance to see these magnificent animals. A charging rhino is no doubt a fearsome sight, yet I feared I may have done the rhinoceros a disservice by using it as a metaphor for danger. I felt a twinge of guilt that when I was looking for an image to represent a giant, obvious threat, the rhino was what came to mind. The reality is that for endangered species, especially the rhinoceros, the human race is the gray rhino. Rhinos are in far more danger from us than we are from them. We need to turn our attention to saving a creature that has walked the earth for more than 50 million years and whose fate will be an indicator of our ability to recognize and act on an important challenge. If the gray rhino framework gets people with power to change the outcomes of a mortal threat to the very existence of the rhinoceros, then I can only hope that the poetic license I've taken will be worth it. So I've been talking so much about policy stuff and finance stuff that I felt the poor rhino was getting lost. So I'm very happy I was able to share that passage with you and that amazing moment from the safari.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I think if anyone has a burning question about the excerpt, I would advocate putting it into the chat. And then if we have time after the open mic portion, maybe we can have some live Q&A if people are up for that. Thank you so much, Michelle. Arnie, did you want to introduce Larry? You're muted. I can, I've got the bio right here, I can do it. Larry O'Dean was born and raised in Flint, Michigan. He attended the University of Michigan, where he won 3 Hopwood Awards in creative writing and Murray State University's low residency MFA program. His recent books include the forthcoming Frequently Asked Questions, as well as Activities of Daily Living, Brief Nudity, Basic Cable Couplets, Abrev, About the Author, and I Am Spam. Selected magazine publications include Berkeley Poetry Review, Statement of Record, Big Bridge, Nude Bruce Review, and Angry Old Man. Also a critically acclaimed songwriter, Dean has numerous releases to his credit, including Good Grief, Product Placement, and Fun with a Purpose with the Injured Parties, Gentrification is Theft with The Me Decade, and Fables and Slang with Post Office. Find out more about Larry at larryodeen.com, and I will let Larry introduce, I believe he's reading from his forthcoming publication tonight. But I
have
yes.
unmuted myself. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, I'm really happy to be reading from the forthcoming book, Frequently Asked Questions, which would have been out by now if not for what's going on in the world. It's my third book with Salmon Poetry, which is a great publisher based in Ireland. And this is the debut of a number of these works. So without further ado, I'm going to start with the more or less title poem from the collection, which is called Frequently Asked Questions. Why did the chicken cross the road? Which came first, the chicken or the egg? If a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? Who's on first? Say what? If I take a left at the light, will I get there any faster? Who's coming to the party? Should I bring something? Why does it hurt when I pee? Wherefore art thou? Does Teflon stick to anything? To be or not to be? Who are you kidding? Can I get a witness? What is this white blotchy stuff on my chocolate bar? Do I need a passport? Should I buy a helmet? Who's there? Which seems an appropriate question to ask for something like this. The next one here is the elements of style. If I could be any punctuation mark, I'd be the semicolon. Much as I love the decisive period and respect the comma for its cool, calm, and level-headedness, and admire the hyphen, the most congenial of clarifiers, holding the door open and showing the path for wayward syllable-sliced halves crowded out of line and displaced, uprooted, and appreciate the exclamation point for its forthrightness and confidence, the way it unabashedly and unashamedly declares its intentions, though at the top of its lungs, and if repeatedly, how that bravado sounds like an avuncular drunk to no one in particular, brings me back to the semicolon, slyly winking, saying, listen to this and that in a conversational tone, less like a lawyer pleading their case than a storyteller stacking fact upon fact, the way bricks build a house into which we step and think, this is not just a house, it's a home, feeling less alone. I'm a big fan of starting with titles first for poems, and I'll get a lot of those from reading stuff online, which I'm pretty sure where this came from. Country singer posts a selfie from vacation. Beyond them lyrics, committee writ cornpone quips, quick drawn out a 10-gallon hat. Long as you include all the buzzwords, who's really listening anyway? There is that self to sell and soul, the whole picture merchandised for digital consumption, a shotgun marriage of gumption and gifts downloaded and devoured like barbecue ribs, finger licking, ear smacking, eye cracking, artfully askew as if surreptitiously snapped on the fly, dawdling along the Playa del Amor with a Gibson and a beer. You know, I'm not sure if it's GIF or GIF, and I've heard both schools subscribe to, but I think gumption and GIF go together well, so I went with the hard G sound. So putting this collection together as I've done for any that weren't thematically linked by one idea, just incorporated stuff I'd been working on over a period of time, and in that period of time, there were some thematic poems I did work on, and one of them was a selection of Chopped poems, because I'm a big fan of the Chopped cooking show. So I took the idea about as far as it could go, and I think I wound up with 3 or 4 that I liked, and this is Chopped Slasher Films edition. What I've made for you today is a horror or a thriller of a dish, typically involving a mysterious, generally psychopathic entree, scalloping and kneading a sequence of adolescent or young adult taste buds in a secluded kitchen with little or no adult supervision, point of view tequila shots representing the chef's perspective, a jolting sauce and graphic deglazing by vinegar and Meunier, with a twist at the end, leaving it open for seconds. I think it's Meunier. So I watch a lot of TV, and I'm kind of fascinated by these very serious ads that will have, if you, well, let me back up for a second. I like to look at all the print that is under ads. And it's so easy to do that now. Just pause your television and take a look. And one of my favorite little things to see is actor portrayal along the bottom. And so it inspired this idea for this poem, which is called Actor Portrayal. I am not a heartburn sufferer. I do not stay at La Quinta. My name is not Flo. I am not a talking lizard, concerned doctor, alcoholic attorney, proud parent, or umpire with low testosterone. I haven't fallen, and I can get up. I am not having a torrid affair with DA Jessica's daughter while helping her cover up the cliffhanger murder for hire of her former husband, a cruel astronaut. Do not assume I can rappel down skyscrapers, outrun fireballs, parkour eel-like through open windows, squeeze off round after round of assault weapon fire while sliding on my knees across rain-slicked pavement. I am not now, nor have I ever been, the kooky sidekick. If you punch me, I will cry. Underneath all of this CGI, I have two-pack abs. I never once saved the city from any colorful villains. I am not the roguish bachelor with a tastefully decorated Toronto penthouse standing in for Manhattan, and you are not the unbelievably unattached 20-something reporter I will meet cute at the DMV. Hilarious hijinks ensue because we both coincidentally share the same name, bumping heads at the counter. A wisecracking Paul Giamatti as Clark the clerk stifles a dour smirk, sipping product placement Starbucks while we don't playfully banter for the 35th consecutive take. Beverage. This is called Caesar. I teach as a poet in residence, one of my gigs, and at the end of in the public schools, and at the end of the school year, students often want to hear my own work, and there's not a lot of poems that I can read to them for various reasons, mostly language and thematic reasons, but this is one that they usually can dig. So this is Caesar. Caesar was the greatest of emperors, so comfortable with himself he didn't need to prove a thing, and declared that as his legacy, a salad would bear his name, while munching on lettuce and croutons before the assembled throngs. I was about to say one of my favorite, but I'm still going to go with that. One of my favorite signs to see is this one. The title is the next one here. Favorite more for, because that sounds terrible once you hear what the name of the poem, more for the kind of images that it evokes. So, bridge may be icy. Bridge may be icy or not. Its reputation for iciness is renowned, but don't get your hopes up if you're an ice aficionado and its slipperiness is nil. I know some guys. We could buy out all the bagged ice at 7-Eleven and dump it on the crest of the bridge if that makes you happy. But if you're addicted to ice, instead, me and the same guys will convene an intervention, calling in friends and family to help wean you off of the harder stuff. Icicles, hail, icebergs. The Titanic sinkers and skate pond tricksters, looking oh so smooth, safe, or weight-bearing to those unschooled in the ways of the 15 known solid phases of water. So deciding what to read from this collection kind of was easy enough if I just stuck with shorter works. The book itself is a mix of shorter and semi-longer. So I did want to read one that's a little bit longer. And a couple years ago, I don't know, something I read prompted me to think about the Spuds MacKenzie character. And if you don't, I'm guessing a lot of people here probably do know who Spuds MacKenzie is, but if you don't, it's easy enough to Google. And then I remembered his appearing on this Dick Clark special, and it sort of had seared itself into my young brain. And so it prompted this poem, which is DC meets Spuds MacKenzie. What a woebegone night. Clark, that dense dullard, serious as sin, introduced me as the guru of good times, chancellor of charm, sage of sophistication, laughing at that one. How unprofessional. Then everybody's favorite party animal. That was Bud's tagline. He didn't know me from Adam. The crowd went nuts, though. The applause sign was lit. I slumped and yawned through most of it, decked out in that tacky tuxedo. It was hot under all those lights. I think I was high, too. Hollywood. The girls, Spudettes, were there, the 3 Bs, blonde, brunette, and black, hired to appeal to targeted demographics. I peed a tad on the brunette. She never broke character on air, but you can see it in her face, just a faint twitch. A real pro. She knew who wrote the checks. What can I say? I had to go, and they were about to cut and do another take without a better reason. Cheapskates. Dick was doing his mightiest Edward R. Murrow. There are these vicious rumors. You pick up the tabloids at the supermarket checkout stands, and is there any truth to the fact that he is female? Wouldn't it be truth to the rumor? I'm not a writer, just the talent. Look for my name on the dressing room door. The girls deflected, improv their jokes, and unless they popped off my tiny trousers on primetime television, it was a non-starter. Dipshit. I was informed the week prior Bubbles the chimp had been on, sitting in my seat, a fellow with extraordinary talent, Clark cooed in all solemnness. Michael Jackson's part-time monkey pal. Yeah, talent. Did Bubbles sing, dance, moonwalk? He can curl his lip, roll his tongue. Paging Jane Goodall. Monkey see, monkey do. No one cops to whatever happened at Neverland. Give that boy a banana and call it a day. Hooray. Then as soon as it started, it was over. Our host stood, giving the cue to the Spudettes, chiming in unison, party right, party cool. But remember, he prompted, know when to say when. That's called a disclaimer. Cue the canned music and on to the next schmuck. It's a living. Later in the limo, I lapped from my private bowl, tucks neatly folded and put away, while the girls took turns hand-feeding me gram checks, killing time on Anheuser-Busch's dime. It was part of their contracts, but I never heard them complain. And I have one last poem here. Thank you all for listening. Hopefully this book will be out sometime in the summer. And this last one is called A Cat That's Surprisingly Good at Jenga. A cat that's surprisingly good at Jenga trumps the pot-raking pooch at poker, tops a turtle who's tops at Yahtzee, and the gerbil checkers champ tied with the backgammon sleuth of bears, or that monopoly mastering mallard, wild dabbling drake that he is, slumming his way to solvency, bankrupting bitterns, buzzards, and bobolinks, squelching the squirrel that shines at Scrabble, and the crocodile king of Clue. But when it comes to chess, nobody checkmates the cheetah, or wants to. Thank you very much. I will unmute myself. Mute myself.
Thank you so much, Larry. It's great to hear poetry. I'm just thrilled with the fact that we've got nonfiction, poetry, young adult children's books, and fiction tonight. So moving right along with Marlene Targa Brill. Marlene is a former special educator and an award-winning author of over 70 books covering a range of subjects. Her nonfiction addresses issues like diabetes, asthma, and Tourette syndrome, while her illustrated books have focused on everything from Tooth Fairies to the Pony Express. Her books are for readers of all ages, from preschoolers through teens and adults. Her most recent titles include Dolores Huerta Stands Strong, The Women Who Demanded Justice, Picture Girl with Michael Sayer, which she'll be reading from tonight, if I remember correctly, and Speech and Language Challenges. Learn more about Marlene at marlenetargbrill.com. And with that, Marlene, I will unmute you. And, oh, you're already unmuted. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Alta. This is great. I'm thrilled to be sharing books with you all, and I'm thrilled to be talking about one of my more recent titles, Picture Girl, which I guess you could, well, we'll read from that. And is anybody in this group, can you raise your hand if you write for kids? Okay. Well, I'm hoping to kind of let you know a little bit how the sausage is made and where I come from. So a lot of this stuff is going to be the same as for adult books. So if you'll bear with me. For those of you who don't know me, I've been around the publishing block for decades, really, sadly. I write nonfiction for Readers Preschool for Adult, as Alta said, biographies like Dolores Huerta Stand Strong, and another recent publication, and historical fiction for young readers. Some of my books have probably taken as long as some of you are old to get published, but let's not go there. I love talking about Picture Girl, an older primary to middle grade historical fiction story about a real girl. In fact, all my historical fiction stories are about real people and real events in their lives. I first heard about Luba, who's later took the name Louise, after presenting at Off-Campus Writers. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but it's a writers group that meets every Thursday at the Wilmette Community House. And it's been around for a really long time. And after I presented, and it was about another historical fiction story I had, a journalist came up to me, and she knew I liked writing about historical fiction and real kids and real events in their lives. And she said she had just written a newsletter article about the perfect subject for me. Well, I don't know about you, but people are always telling me what I should be writing about. And I usually tell them, well, why don't you do it yourself? But she gave me a copy of the article and I read it, and I was thoroughly taken with this woman, her story, and how she stayed true to her childhood interests and talent and went to the Art Institute and became art supervisor for Chicago Public Schools. Better yet, Luba's story fit into my goals for writing. I want to write more girls and women into history. And sometimes when I'm presenting at schools, I remember once a boy raised his hand and he said, "Don't you like boys?" And I said, well, I'm married to one and I do write about boys. In fact, one of another book that was reprinted, Diary of a Drummer Boy, is really about a boy. I also want to empower young readers by telling stories about boys and girls and how their everyday actions can have a difference, you know, on other people's lives. And I like to write to bring a more peaceful, less bullying world. All attributes of Luba's story. This is an immigrant story, a family leaving their home country because of religious persecution. It's a family story. It's about life on Ellis Island and how someone has the perseverance and human spirit to survive and thrive. And for one who loves to paint like me, this is an artist story as well. So I called up Louise and she kindly invited me to her home. And she had just celebrated her 90th birthday and was recovering from hip replacement surgery. But she was adorable. She had platinum blonde hair that was set in a bun on top of her head. And she had these fluffy bangs and a jaunty artistic outfit and the most twinkling blue eyes. And Louise shared with me how she met her husband at the Art Institute. And in a sign of the times back then, she wasn't allowed to teach there because her husband did. And that's how she came to be one of 2 art supervisors for Chicago Public Schools. And her art, I'll have some pictures I can show you later. Lovely prints of people and colorful painted designs that look like stained glass windows. But the best thing she had for me, besides her nine books that she wrote, was a memoir that she had written for her son and grandchildren. And that's where I got the events from her younger life to include in Picture Girl. So I start out with the family having to hide in a neighbor's cellar because the Cossacks, the Russian paid mercenaries, were on a rampage through Zhytomyr, Ukraine town where she lived, killing everyone in their path. Luba gasped as she opened the front door of her house. The kitchen and dining room looked like a tornado had blown through them. Some cabinets were bare. Rumpled clothes oozed out of dresser drawers. More clothing and blankets lay piled on the floors. The strangest sight of all was seeing Papa home from his leather shop. He never returned from work before dinner time. Often he stayed until after sundown. Now Papa held a crying Mama in his arms. Seeing Luba, Mama pushed away from Papa. "What's happening, Mama?" Luba asked. "Why is Papa home? Why are you crying?" "Hush, Luba, we must leave quickly," Mama ordered, wiping her tears. "Put on another layer of clothing." "Where are we going, Mama?" Luba asked louder. "Please tell me what happened." "No more questions now," Mama said. "Once you dress, please help your sister. After she's dressed, make sure your brothers are wearing extra layers of clothes in case they need warmth or must change something. We'll talk once we're ready to leave." Luba noticed that Papa frowned, a sign that he was worried. Mama dabbed away more tears with her handkerchief. They both raced from room to room, shoving articles into bags, some to hide, some to take with them. They closed all the window shutters. Papa stowed jewelry and candlesticks under the secret floorboard. He tucked silver holiday plates in the back of the closet under tablecloths. Mama grabbed blankets and pillows and threw them in a pile. She stuffed bread, cheese, and jam into a sack. Luba left to find her brothers who were hiding in their room. "Do you know what's happening?" Luba asked them. Moishe shook his head no. Favish shrugged his shoulders. Little Yankel ran to Luba and buried his head in her skirt. "Well, we must do as Mama says," Luba said. Luba called for 5-year-old Sonia, Yankel's twin sister, to join them in the boys' room. "Bring your favorite sweaters and skirts with you," Luba told Sonia. "You boys put on another layer of pants and sweaters." Everyone, including Luba, dressed quickly. "We're about ready," Luba called to her parents once everyone was almost dressed. "What should we do now?" "Come here," Papa called. Mama wiped her hands on her apron. "Come close, my little one," she said, opening her arms wide. After hugging each child, she gave them orders. "Favish and Moista, pack a small bag of books and toys to keep you busy and out of trouble," Mama said to Luba's 10 and 11-year-old brothers. "Luba, help Yankel and Sonia do the same. And you bring some treasures to keep you busy too. We must hide in our neighbor's cellar. We have no idea how long we must stay there." Luba wanted no other choice than her colored pencils and notebook. Drawing was her favorite thing to do. Each day after school, she drew pictures, sometimes with her art teacher, Mikkel. Tonight, she hoped drawing would take her mind off the scary soldiers. Now, eventually, the family was able to return, but after several days, but it wasn't to anything that was close to normal. After a while, Luba was kicked out of school. After her father receives notice to enter the Russian army, the family decides it wasn't safe to stay. I followed the family from their flight from the Ukraine and how difficult leaving the only home and family and friends they knew, much like many of the immigrants that are trying to get to our country today. We learned that they go through many trials to finally reach the United States. Sickness, storm at sea, injury, more sickness, all taking time that makes them too late for the new quota on immigrants that the United States has instituted. Back in the early 1920s, the atmosphere wasn't a whole lot better for immigrants than it is today. Although I might have to revise that statement. Even though Papa had a job waiting for him in Chicago. So they wait and wait on Ellis Island for their ship to return and take them back to the Ukraine. They had come there, and then because of all these other things happening, they were going to be sent back anyhow. I talk about life on Ellis Island and their worry about being sent back. And while they wait, Luba draws to feel better. During her long stay on Ellis Island, Luba made many friends. A few of them gave her pictures of their family from home to draw. There was so little to do, her friends often watched her walk. One day, a woman handed Luba a picture of the United States President Woodrow Wilson. He had just died, and his picture was in the newspaper. Luba placed the picture on the floor in front of her. She picked up a pencil and carefully made lines. She checked how long and wide each marking should be with strips of paper. First, Luba formed a round head. Then she added eyes and Wilson's bushy eyebrows and fixed mouth. One by one, the features turned into the exact likeness of the president. A crowd gathered as Luba grew. The guards assumed that large groups of people meant trouble, though. A pot-bellied guard pushed his way toward Luba. As he pushed closer, onlookers scattered. The guard looked surprised to find Luba sitting in the center of the crowd. Several pencil drawings of President Wilson were spread on the floor around her. "Who drew these pictures?" he asked, picking up a drawing. Someone who spoke English pointed to Luba. The guard shook his head. "Such a young girl to draw so well," he said. Then a smile crossed his face. "Come with me," he ordered Luba. He collected the pictures and pointed toward the door. As Luba stood, her legs wobbled like a baby learning to walk. What did I do wrong, she wondered. What will the guard do to me? She noticed her parents across the room. Their frightened looks made Luba worry even more. The guard took Luba into an office near the schoolroom. 3 other men joined them. The guard talked quickly in English. Luba hardly understood a word. The men listened, looked at the pictures, and then turned to Luba. One man pointed to a chair. After Luba sat down, he handed her some pencils, erasers, and paper. Another man took a picture of President George Washington off the wall. He carefully laid it on the table in front of Luba. These men don't believe I can draw, Luba thought. They want to watch me copy the picture from the wall. I'll show them. Luba always liked to draw for others, but these guards made her feel funny. She squirmed in her seat. Her body grew hot. The men watched and quietly waited for her to begin. Luba just stared at the paper. After a few minutes, she forced herself to pick up a pencil. She placed it on the paper, not sure where to begin. Once she started drawing, however, she forgot the guard standing over her. After she finished, Luba looked up. All 4 men stood smiling. One asked to take the picture to show someone. Luba shook her head. She just wanted to leave. The drawing had taken almost an hour. Mama and Papa would be worried. The guard took Luba back to the room with the others. As she entered the room, she saw her parents' faces brighten. Where have you been for so long, little one? Mama asked, hugging her. We've been beside ourselves with worry. Luba told them about the guards and the drawing. At least no one was harmed, Papa said, still worried about the guards. You must be very careful until the boat comes. Watch that your pictures do not get you in trouble. Well, indeed, the pictures didn't get her in trouble, and in fact, they were part of the reason the family was allowed to stay in the United States. I'm just going to read one little short thing at the end where I talk about after they had come to the United States. Here it is. This is after they were here and Louise was an adult. She said, Louise never forgot that her art training began with Mikkel in the Ukraine. She remembered how drawing eased the pain of being left out because she was Jewish. She understood how pictures helped her meet people from other countries on Ellis Island. She knew that drawing had helped her family stay in the United States. Now she tried to find ways for art to help other children. She wrote several books and painted pictures that showed art as a way to build goodwill among people. Above all else, she wanted people to get along, no matter what their race and religion. So if I haven't put you to sleep, let's move on. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Marlene. Was there an image you wanted to show us?
Oh, I did. Thank you for reminding me. I don't know if you can see this. The rounded part here. Oops, you can't see that. Let me see if I can. Wait a minute. Where am I? Oh, I got you instead. Okay.
Yeah, if you just hold it up like right in front of your face, we should be able to see it.
Okay. Here you can see the Chicago Herald when the family got to the United States and they finally made it to Chicago. This is a picture of Luba from the Chicago Herald, and this is the picture of George Washington that she had made that started the ball rolling that got the family to stay in the United States. Thank you, Alta.
Thanks so much. And I love that idea of art uniting people.
Oh, definitely.
Really lovely. Thank you so much. All right. And our fourth and final featured reader before we open it up to the rowdy open mic section, I will bring up, and let's see. Yeah, I'll bring up Rebecca Johns-Trissler.
Hi, Alta.
Hi, Rebecca. Welcome. And I'm so thrilled you brought a bunch of your students.
Yes.
Rebecca's first novel, Icebergs, was a finalist for the Hemingway Foundation PEN Award and a recipient of a Michener Copernicus Fellowship. Her second, The Countess, was a Target Discovery pick and published in 10 languages. I haven't yet asked you which 10, but we'll discuss that another time. Her work has appeared in Plowshares, Story Quarterly, the Mississippi Review, the Harvard Review, Printers Row Journal, the Chicago Tribune, Cosmopolitan, Mademoiselle, Ladies' Home Journal, Self, and 17, among others. A graduate of the Iowa Writers Workshop and the Missouri School of Journalism, she is the director of the MFA and MA in Creative Writing and Publishing at DePaul University. Learn more about Rebecca at RebeccaJohns.com. And take it away, Rebecca.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Alta, for inviting me. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, good. I was, when I met Alta, we were talking about having some students come in to read for their MFA, which I'll talk about a little more in a minute. I'm always trying to tell my students that they need to experience reading in public. And so when Alta invited me to read too, I thought, well, I better put my money where my mouth is and volunteer as well. So I'm going to read you something completely different. Bear with me, please. It's from my work in progress called Mortified. It's a novel. It's a dark comedy about an undertaker named Peter Button whose business is going under quickly. In the scene I'm about to read, happens just after he's caught his wife sleeping with the teenage hearse driver. The other people you're going to hear about are Lillian Ricks, who is the wealthiest woman in town. She's really pretty awful. And Lillian's stepdaughter, Kathleen Ricks, who is the girl he loved in high school. So I'll try to do this quickly so we can get to the open mic. The business is called Button Brothers. So the alley behind Button Brothers was empty. All the businesses closed for the evening when Peter wheeled out the utility casket with the kid inside, unconscious and gagged and stuffed into a body bag for good measure. Even if it had been noon, Peter knew no one would stop the mortician to ask him what he was doing, why he was taking a body out of the funeral home instead of in. No one liked to think too hard about the details of a mortician's job. All afternoon, he'd imagined how it would go. First, he would drive up to Mount Pleasant, out to the grounds of the deserted Palace Hotel. He'd untie the kid, pull him to his feet, and march him out back at gunpoint. Jared would probably soil his pants at the sight of the gun, would weep and beg for his life. How satisfying that would be, watching him beg for mercy. No, please, sir. Don't kill me, please. Peter would wait until Jared was blubbering. Sorry, I'm scrolling down. Peter would wait until Jared was blubbering and covered with tears and snot, then say, I'll give you a running start. Then he'd let the boy go, watch his back disappearing through the trees as Peter laughed and called, keep running, or I'm going to shoot. That was the plan. Peter drove up Mount Pleasant slowly, taking his time. His father's gun lay on the front seat, wrapped in a towel and hidden at the bottom of a duffel bag. The town went by in a blur of green and blue. It was the end of June, a few days before the beginning of the tourist season, but already there were sunbathers at the town beach off the square, the tinny sound of a Sousa march. He thought he heard the kid pounding on the inside of the casket in time to the music, "Let me out." Or maybe it was just the beating of Peter's wounded heart. Except that when Peter stopped the hearse up on the slope behind the palace, when he got out and opened the casket in the back of the hearse, Jared Fassbinder was already dead. His face had gone blue around the lips and eyes, his expression slack, suffocated on the gag in his mouth. No, 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 oh God, oh damn, oh damn. He tried hauling the boy out of the casket, yanked hard on the body bag, spilling it in the casket and the boy on the ground, the body tumbling sideways while Peter tried CPR, pounding on the kid's chest and breathing into his mouth over and over. When that didn't work, he slapped the boy until he wore himself out, cursing the name of Jared Fassbinder and Liz and himself while he was at it. Nothing ever worked out for him, nothing. He kicked the body hard in the ribs, felt something give. You miserable little shit. What did you go and die for? An accident, a stupid, useless accident. Peter sat down on a nearby log to wipe the tears from his face with his sodden handkerchief. Oh God, he said again. Look at this. Look what you made me do. He'd be arrested. He'd go to prison. He couldn't save his business or his marriage anymore. Liz would divorce him, sell everything and take the money, move to Chicago or New York or London, anywhere she wanted. Even if Peter could convince a judge and jury that it was a mistake, it would be too late. He'd lose everything, everything. The gun was still in his hand. He could end it all here. Peter stood looking down at the dead kid in the body bag, Jared's face settling into death, not so much an expression as a lack of one. It was something he was used to seeing on corpses of all stripes, the moment of change from a person to a thing, a matter to be disposed of. Lucky you, he said, all your problems are over. Maybe he could drag the body into the lake, weigh it down with rocks and sink it, let it disappear into the water the way everything else had in his life. Love, luck, let it go down to the bottom and rot where no one would ever find it. It could work. After a few days, the kid would be declared missing. There might be questions, but without a body, no one could accuse Peter of murder. Without a body, no one would be able to prove a thing. The evening sun was breaking through the trees, the summer birds settling in for the night, the darkened bulk of the old palace hotel, the only witness. He pushed the body with his toe. Sinking it would make the most sense, though there was always the risk it would turn up later, float to the surface and betray him. Maybe the crematorium, except if he went in there, someone might see, might ask questions. It was too close to the center of town. Maybe the woods. Out on the lake, a pair of ducks rose into the air, beating it with their wings. The dead boy lay at his feet like a log. A sense of calm, even hope, rising elation. He'd been thinking about this all wrong. A dead body was money in Peter's line of work, $10,000, maybe $20,000, depending on the choice of services. A dead body was bank. He'd done funerals for all kinds of people. Most died decently in bed, but others went unfound for weeks, even months. The hoarders, the shut-ins, who wandered away in winter and froze. Peter only had to hide the kid for a while, hide him someplace he wouldn't be found until he was sufficiently decomposed to make the cause of death impossible to determine. A few weeks maybe, a couple of months at most. The sun was behind the trees as Peter started digging a hole in the mud at the edge of the lake, judging every spade full of dirt, every tree root and rock. It must be shallow, but not too shallow. Obvious, but not too obvious. The body would need to be found, just not too soon. No body meant no funeral, and the funeral was everything. The funeral was the whole point. The water was turning black as the sun sank. He wouldn't think about Jared's mother at home waiting for him, wondering where he'd gone. He wouldn't think about Liz with her eyes screwed shut in ecstasy. She lay back on the hard little bed that had once belonged to Peter's father. Peter stomped on the spade again, lifted another mound of smelly mud. A few more, only a few more, and the hole would be deep enough. It was occurring to him that Jared could be the first if Peter were careful, if he were smart. He could plan, prepare. What did he really need? A few more funerals, that was all. A little bit of good luck. Maybe he'd start with the customers who didn't pay their bills, the ones who embarrassed him and made him look like a fool. Maybe Liz, though that would be tricky. Maybe Lillian Ricks herself. Lillian was the answer. His salvation, Lillian in the vase of foxglove. Liz had said the flowers were poison. The petals were fragile, brown and dry, a mess of petals and leaves like nothing so much as old tea leaves. Exactly like old tea leaves. He could picture it now, handing Lillian a cup of tea, watching her old hands wrap themselves around the cup. Here you go, ma'am. So sorry. He'd watch her wattled throat bob as she took a long drink, a bit of kick in her chamomile. It wouldn't take long. Lillian had health problems for years. Heart problems, lung problems, the cane, the oxygen tank. Everyone knew how sick she was. No one would be surprised, not the police, not Kathleen. He'd help Lillian's stepdaughter pick out the most expensive casket, a vault, a full funeral service, only the best for Lillian Ricks. Maybe when it was done, Kathleen would embrace Peter, tearful and grateful for his professionalism and service, his understanding in her time of need. The woman who'd scorned him 25 years ago would come crawling back. He could save it all, the business, his future. He'd do such a good job with Lillian Ricks's funeral that people all over town would talk about it. They'd beg Peter to do their funerals, to make their dead relatives the envy of the neighborhood. He wouldn't be a loser anymore. Kathleen would beg him to take her back. Peter, I want you. Peter, I missed you. She'd whisper in his ear that she'd never been so content, never in her whole life, that marrying Peter Button was the best thing that ever happened to her. They'd have it all. They'd have each other in the business, and they'd be happy, so happy. Of course they would. Okay, so that is the first time I've read from that, so thank you for not thinking I'm totally insane. I'm going to introduce some of our students from the DePaul MFA program in Writing and Publishing. The MFA is new this year, and we're extremely proud to have among our first class Chad Baker, Crystal Clark, and Carol Macon-Fleischer, who are going to read in a little bit. We're also very sorry that we can't be doing this in public, and have a big celebration, but I'm really excited for you all to get a chance to hear the things they've been working on. We're enormously proud of them. So please welcome, I think, who's first? I think Crystal is first. So Crystal?
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Hey, good.
Nice
guess
to
you can
see
hear me
you.
okay?
Yep.
You too. So should I just jump into it?
Yeah, tell us a little bit about what you're doing and what it is, and then start.
Okay. Again, my name is Crystal. I'm working on a memoir about my time in and after the military, and this is a short little excerpt. No matter how I positioned myself, the wind carried my urine back to me like a boomerang, little droplets spraying my pants. The desert was rarely, if ever, still. Wind whipped across the Anbar Providence's flat expanse with little to interrupt its momentum, moving easily through the sparse, scrubby vegetation. It was around 1 a.m. and pitch dark, except for the convoy's weak ambient light, which I used to aim my Army-issued phallus towards my vehicle's gigantic tire. This phallus was a graduation gift of sorts, issued to me by the National Guard after they scooped me up my senior year of college for a second tour in Iraq. I was on my way to Spanish class one afternoon when I got that call from my commander that I would be deploying again. He gave me a second to absorb that blow before he dropped a second one. The higher-ups have deemed your job non-essential to the war effort, he said. I thought war effort sounded very World War II. He explained that the Army was taking all the journalists in my unit, including me, and farming us out to the infantry to carry out some mission. I was confused since women were barred from serving in line units, but he didn't have any more information. 6 weeks later, when I arrived at my new unit, I was issued things I had never needed before as a journalist, including a grenade launcher, night vision goggles, and of course, my phallus. I stood at the wooden supply counter as Sergeant Eastman, the unit supply sergeant with the pockmarked face, called off items from a list on his clipboard while his supply minion gathered them from dusty shelves and placed them in a pile in front of me. 1 poncho, 2 grenade pouches, 1 assault pack, and this, Eastman said as he reached into a cardboard box off to the side. He placed a small plastic package on top of my supply pile like a cherry on a sundae. I eyed the lettering printed on the side, Female Urinary Director. An awkward silence hung in the air when it registered that I had just been issued a penis. The device projected the message, "You don't belong here," or maybe my insecurity projected that message onto it. Either way, I felt embarrassed, not because they were handing me a whiz apparatus, but because they had to make an accommodation for me, however small. There are about 60 people in my unit, only 3 of us female, and the ladies were all issued this phallus, alternatively known as the Pud Pack, the Shiwi, or Mrs. Johnson. I suppose this was the Army's solution to integrating us into an all-male unit. It allowed us to maintain our virtue whilst peeing among the boys in the wilds of Iraq. When I got back to the barracks, I ripped open the packet to examine its contents, which consisted of 2 pieces, a 6-inch clear plastic hose and a powder pink cup, which would really pop against my camouflage uniform. I threaded the hose through the hole in the cup and leaned back in my bunk, turning the plastic over in my hand. There are many like it, but this one is mine. Thank you guys for letting me read.
Thank you so much, everyone. That was, if you missed it, that was Crystal Clark. And then Chad, are you ready? Chad Baker? Yep, you're unmuted now.
Great. All right. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to read just a little excerpt from a short story that recently sold to Ellery Queen's Mystery Magazine. It is not run in that magazine yet and is not scheduled yet, but it'll come out hopefully sometime this year. And this is about a woman who, the day before, has learned that her landlord, who lives beneath her family, has been murdered. Almost immediately after the door clicked shut behind Adam and the kids, Patricia regretted staying home. The near silence of the house, broken only by the ticking wall clock and the occasional clang of the radiators, was too expansive. It begged to be filled with her thoughts. And even think what she thought she might be thinking seemed like an unforgivable betrayal. She made herself an omelet and answered some work emails. Then she carried one of the kitchen chairs over to the long, bright rectangle of sunlight that came in through the bay windows. The apartment was still chilly, but the fall of the gentle November sun on her skin felt nice. She sat there and sipped a cup of hot lemon tea and realized that it was already too late. Trying not to think about something always has the inverse effect. Pink elephants and so forth. She gave up. She admitted to herself that she thought her husband might have stabbed their landlord to death. As soon as she allowed the idea free rein, she wanted to laugh. It was like when, as a child, she would sometimes become convinced that there was someone hiding in the shower. Once you finally screwed up the courage to yank back the curtain, there was only relief and embarrassment. Obviously, it couldn't have been Adam. First of all, he had an alibi. Carl had most likely been killed at around 7:30 p.m. Monday night, and Adam had come home from class, red-eyed with exhaustion, laptop bag in tow, at 9:40 p.m. And then there was the physical aspect. Her husband was 5'8", probably not more than 180 paunchy pounds. He was not an intimidating guy. He looked like what he was, a 36-year-old software developer who had played Dungeons and Dragons regularly until the birth of their second child, and now didn't leave the house except to stand around sipping craft beer at children's birthday parties. Even Adam's copper-colored beard did not look particularly manly, but rather gave his face a pale, ruddy cheer like a park ranger. Carl was larger than Adam, even if Carl's bulk was mostly fat, and Patricia had to doubt whether Adam could have overcome him. But these were, or should have been, secondary considerations. The real reason Adam could not have done this thing is that he was Adam. He read to his children almost every night and did theatrical voices for all the characters. He sometimes cried when talking about his late father. He sometimes cried at the end of movies. He was the type of man who not only sometimes cried, but made earnest posts on the internet, proudly admitting that he sometimes cried and calling on his fellow men to hashtag end toxic masculinity. He was kind and loving and good, and he did not have the capacity for lethal violence. And yet, She could not stop thinking of Adam's face before he stormed down to the basement Sunday morning. The insensate rage that had shone in his eyes. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Chad. It totally bums me out that with the mute function, I can't unmute us all to have the clapping noises, but then it does funny things with the screen. That was fabulous, thank you. And now we've got Carolyn Fleischer.
I'm over here.
There you are, unmuted yourself. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. So yeah, my name is Caroline Macon Fleischer. It's a long name. Usually I just go by Caro. I'm excited to be here. I am going to share a short excerpt from this collection of short stories I'm working on. And I started working on these stories last year for school, but they've sort of become like my coronavirus project. So the idea is that it's like a storybook for adults. And all of the stories feature different women who have postpartum depression, basically, but the book's like not about postpartum depression. It's like about women who just so happen to have postpartum depression. So I'll just very quickly show you this illustration that pairs with the story that I'm reading tonight. So I'm just going to read a short excerpt from my story called The Rosé. Are you seeing my screen share? Oh, here we go. So there's the illustration that I worked on that goes with this. Great. So I'll stop my screen share now and get started. The rosé was pinker than lipstick. When Gabby opened the bottle, a delicious cold fog rose into the summer air. It was her 6th glass that day. She was at a barbecue and everyone was drinking. The bottles were abundant, so no one noticed she drank everyone under the table. Over there, the kids played in the grass. Over here, the adults drank, some more than others, and this was what life was about. Gabby was already thinking about where to stop for more on the way home. She liked tequila on ice for her nightcap after her daughter went to bed, and then another for the nightcap of that nightcap. And at some point, she'd certainly convinced Jalen to do a round of shots with her. She was drawn to the delicacy of shot glasses. Their tiny nature gave femininity to an otherwise masculine activity. There was nothing like the briny taste of warm salt, the jolt of the shot itself, and the teeth sinking into the sourest of sour limes. She loved the light thump of the glass hitting the table. It was the sound of a job done, like a bell at the end of a wrestling match. And then she was still holding the little lime. She could eat limes all day, especially when she had been drinking. She dug into them like clementines, only noticing the roof of her mouth was raw the next morning. "Let's do shots," she told the group at the barbecue. Everyone laughed at how crazy she was. Crazy Gabby. Of course they would do a shot, but only one, because Gabby was so crazy. "We'll regret this tomorrow," they all cheered and clinked glasses. But Gabby wouldn't regret it because it was just another day. "You're such a bad influence," another woman said with faux fear in her eyes. The kids were laughing across the grove. An older child held Gabby's daughter by the hands, helping her into a plastic pool. The girl loved the water just like Gabby. Here and there, she toddled up to Gabby and pointed at her glass of rosé. "Pink," she exclaimed, "thirsty." "No, you won't like rosé," Gabby told her. "Only mommy likes rosé." "Pink," the girl pouted. Finally, someone saved the situation with a cup of pink lemonade. "See, we both have one now," Gabby said and clinked her wine with the daughter's lemonade. "Like mother, like daughter," someone commented. Gabby was surprised how quickly her daughter's glass of lemonade disappeared. It was as though it vanished into air, and the girl was already requesting something else. She couldn't have anything else. It was dusk, and she had had enough already. The crowd began to dissipate. Paper plates were thrown into the garbage, cups recycled in the alley. Everything was gone except Gabby's rosé, which she clutched into the last possible second. She asked Jalen if she could finish before they hit the road. "Can you drive?" she pouted when she was done. Jalen nodded empathetically. "One too many, Gabby?" "No," she played. "I just don't like driving." Gabby tossed her cup into an overcrowded wastebasket. A number of flies went after it, ready to feast. If no one had been watching, Gabby would have licked those trace amounts of dew clean, but she was a mother and had to be dignified. On the way home, they stopped just a little bit out of the way. "Their selection is better," Gabby qualified, and Jalen sighed. In the back seat, their daughter was wailing. It was time for bed. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Caro. All right, so I have a list, and I'm sorry to just be like sort of going along. I'm quite moved by all the readings. I just want to try and fit everyone in tonight. I have a list of people who've already signed up for the open mic portion. And then I also want to keep it open if we have time to anyone who didn't RSVP to me, but feel free to use the raise hand function on the chat so that I can call on you. So first up, we've got Amanda Sarazian. You there, Amanda?
Yeah, I'm here. So I'm going to read from a translation in progress. The author is Alex Leila, a Brazilian. And this is a novel that I'm working on. So, through the bamboo stalks, the faint light of 4:30, 4:40, almost 5 in the morning. As the sun shuttles along, invading the city, the shadow on her face goes from pillar to post, passing, repassing, as on a car window, capturing, bouncing off the pieces of landscape. Her face, that oval contour, emanating the scent of woundedness, its vague center hidden behind her hair. We can say unmistakably that her face is made of wind and sand. But no, we'll say it better. Actually, the wind, sand, face, and hair don't matter. The truth is that she is emerging from hell. The truth is that she is coming back to life, ashen, thawed, alone. She gets up, checks her clothes, a bit torn, bloodied, readjusts them, brushes her hands over the fabric trying to clean it, in vain. According to Dante in Hell, it's so cold the bones lock, inverted movements. She walks slowly as if she still carried inside her the shock sustained hours before when she confirmed this was, in fact, an assault. On the verge of death, amputation, the blow, the beating. Enough to bring to light a spark of that experience which, having automatically become lightning, comes alive in the memory of the attack. A snake waiting to strike, a dragon preparing to spit fire. She shakes her head, preventing the spark from bursting into flame, drawing it once again to the heart of the blaze. She concentrates on this, misdirecting her memory so it can register the attack. Smoldering embers that cause her dizziness, haziness, misdirecting and attending to another reality that has nailed down her flesh since she opened her eyes, the pain. Stronger than the memory of the assault, what riddles her flesh is the pain of pliers pulling teeth, the pain of water scalding feet, hands, neck, genitals, breasts. Mainly there, on the nipples of her bitten breasts, and the purple tread marks, she whispers, touching herself. Will they go away someday? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And if people are curious, if you want to just put the author and title of what you're translating, I'm curious. If you could put that in the chat, we'd appreciate it. Okay. Next up, we've got Selden Yuan.
Am I unmuted? Oh,
You're unmuted. Welcome, Selden. Selden and I did an MFA program together in New York. And he's an amazing poet and novelist, but the novel isn't out there yet. Am I too many spoilers? Okay, I'll let you go, Selden.
I'll just read a couple of poems. This one's called How to Be Funny. How to be funny. To be funny how? Be how to funny. Funny to be how? Be funny to how? How funny to be? To how funny be? Be too funny how? Funny. How to be. This one's called Behind the Brush. Some of these poems end up existing as visual art pieces, but it's sort of hard to explain. They're all a little different, but this one was also made into a sculpture. This is called Behind the Brush. Behind the brush, We could not have seen one another. Then was only sky. We had to leave, wondering, among other things, where birds came from, where birds go to. Camouflaged by our leaving, thoughts we saw only ourselves. Alone, envying stones, we were saddened by logs as arms cradled down, back until our branches touched. By chance, there was never chance. We are trees. We have always been together. This one's called I Draw a Line. I draw a line to divide this space in two in order to not know where I am, not to render this space unfamiliar, to imagine that I may not be alone so that there's room for a dialogue, for movement. And I'll just read two quick ones. This one's called Perspective. In the ocean, treading, all effects float away from me. Standing on a hill, each good placed on the ground tumbles from me. Yet in the plains, all trappings fallen are lost in the brush. Still, in a field, a forest, the city, perspective always points forward. And this will be the last one. It's called In the Memory of Photos. Again, I had to leave. Behind what could not be carried was photographed to a weight and size identical to small paper. Remember, do not forget. Until again I had to move. Then I remembered. I cannot remember. So I photographed moments among people within landscapes, light arrangements of table settings, thumbtacks, bedding boxes by windows, and move. I photographed until I had to photograph the photographs, quartering the weight until the mnemonic became a move I could not move, not move I could not stay, to not forget or stop. Thank you.
Thanks, Selden. All right, Julia.
I'm muted.
You are unmuted.
It's wonderful to be, I have to look at the little box. It's wonderful to be here with all of you. And Rebecca, your students have certainly done you proud. I just want to read a short piece I wrote for a news service a couple of years ago that strikes me as relevant during our current crisis. It's about an old friend, Ambrose Najoni, a taxi driver who lives with his family in a one-room house. Can you, I gotta see, outside Sierra Leone, outside Freetown in Sierra Leone, Western country, a West African country the size of New York. And what is touching to me is that he sends me text messages every other day asking how I'm faring during the pandemic. He writes in Creole, which is an English-based language. I won't use his accent, just note that he says D instead of thee. He begins his notes with the loveliest greetings. He writes things like, "Dear Julia, who is by my side." About Chicago, he wrote, "Julia, I'm just watching CNN news about Chicago, been a hot spot for the coronavirus. I'm really worried about you." On Sunday, he wrote, "Julia, is really sad the news I'm hearing about New York. It makes me shed tears." An evangelical Christian, he doesn't understand that I'm Jewish, but no one gives me more hope in a time of crisis. Julia, over 300 bodies they have buried today. Ambrose Najoni texted me from Freetown, Sierra Leone, after torrential rains and mudslides left corpses floating down the street. Local leaders say the death count this week reached 1,000. in a country too often forgotten. 12 years have passed since Njoni drove me in his taxi during my 6-week trip to the West African nation, but he still sends instant messages telling me that Jesus loves me and news of the latest disaster to befall his God-forsaken place. When will you come back to Freetown? Njoni asks me again and again. Never, I say silently to myself. I doubt I can once again bear witness to such relentless sorrow. As a visiting fellow at Northwestern Law School's Center for International Human Rights, I went to Sierra Leone to watch proceedings of the special court addressing human rights violations during the country's 11-year civil war and to interview survivors of trauma. I visited segregated settlements built especially for amputees whose arms and sometimes legs were chopped off by revolutionary United Front rebels. And I spoke to RUF perpetrators, like the born-again Christian who cried as he told me of eating his victims' hearts. A slight, gentle man, Njoni, then in his mid-20s, was determined to be my protector, picking me up at my hotel early each morning and steering me away from danger. He navigated his rickety car through 6 lanes of traffic in Freetown and along the dirt roads to outlying villages, frantically tending to his vehicle when it broke down in the heat. I never met someone who cared so much about my day, who I met, what I saw, and what I thought of his country. Ah, Julia, he'd say after lunch, after I tracked down a government official, you are having a fine day. I was his older sister from America, and he would never forget me. When I returned home, he began saving up his pennies to call every few months. Then Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp changed everything. Now he sends me pictures weekly of his wife and 3 young children, interspersed with news of the day in Creole, an English-based Creole language. Most of his stories are about families and work. Julia, we are still waiting for the company to pay our monies, and they have already closed down because of financial problem. My brother Abdul has been paralyzed. Only God knows why. We have taken him up country to see if he can be cured by a native doctor. You have forgotten me, Julia. There are the religious messages accompanied by pictures of a lily-white Jesus in a country that remains predominantly Muslim. Never ask for a light of rain, just pray to God for a better umbrella. During the Ebola crisis that killed thousands in Sierra Leone and neighboring countries, the messages came frequently. Each day he sent the body counts reported in Sierra Leone's numerous tabloids and described the corpses piling up in the streets. I wrote back inadequate condolence notes, sent a little money, made donations to NGOs, and wondered how this slight young man held on to his face through an unending course of war and natural disaster. The week's messages and photographs, which sometimes arrive every half hour, are about the flooding and mudslides exacerbated by deforestation that have left thousands dead, that have left hundreds dead and thousands more homeless. I thank God, Julia, we were able to escape, but we lost all our properties. But the life is more important, I thank God. People are still trapped under the debris because 2 things happened, the flooding and the landslide. We cannot find my wife's auntie and her 8 children. My Harvard Divinity School education and my years as a writer specializing in religion and human rights had not prepared me for such extreme loss upon loss. Tragedy has deepened Njoni's face, but I have begun to lose interest in such questions as whether there is a God who acts upon the world. I just know at the end of the day, it brings Njoni comfort that someone is witnessing being instant messenger. When are you coming, he asks between emojis. I don't know, I say, but Njoni makes sure I will never forget. And I'll just add one thing. Njoni was upset about one thing in the article, just one thing, and that is that I said I wasn't coming back. Thanks.
Thank you, Julia. Was that published already, did you say?
Yeah, Yeah.
Can you put it in the chat?
Oh, I don't know how to do that.
Oh, don't worry about it.
Okay.
I just
Okay.
want to get your work out there. We'll talk about it later. Thank you so
Okay.
much. Okay, next up, Gregory Rents. Are you ready? Is that you, Greg?
Oh, there are you. Okay. Yes, thank you. Great. This is going to be fun. So I was a urban firefighter for 28 years, and when I retired, like 11 years ago, I thought I might like to write a novel, because really, how hard could it be? Yeah, it was pretty hard. After 10 years of creative writing courses, workshops, conferences, couldn't tell you how many editors, I finally sold my novel last year, Beneath the Flames. And it's actually garnered quite a number of awards already. It's just been really taken off very nicely. So anyway, I'm going to read the first page and a half to you, the opening of the novel. So, chapter 1, Beneath the Flames. Lunch couldn't come soon enough. Mitch Garner had been mowing row after mind-numbing row of hay since early morning. His buzzing pager cut through the rumbling exhaust of the tractor. All units respond to a report of smoke in the vicinity of 7600 County Q, north of Milroy. Repeat, all units respond. Mitch jammed the pager into his grungy overalls and sprinted to the milking parlor, leaving the moss-green John Deere 4020 in the middle of the half-mowed field. He stuck his head inside the parlor where his younger brother, 18-year-old Chris, was wiping down the teats of a cow. Mitch shouted over the hammering air compressor. "Hey, Chris, sounds like another grass fire out by the Hillenbrands. I gotta fly. Let Dad know." "Sure, I'll tell him," Chris said while slipping a set of 4 cylindrical teat cups onto a stomping cow. "Just don't expect me to finish haying while you're out playing with your hose." As he ran to his truck, Mitch's thoughts turned to last Sunday's potluck lunch at the Hillenbrands. Neighboring farm families had gathered to celebrate Maggie Hillenbrand's 5th birthday. Mitch had trailered his old pony Bert to Maggie's party as a surprise. When he had pulled to a stop, 6 pint-sized children charged across the yard with Maggie out front. The flaxen-haired little girl jumped into his arms, hugging him hard around the neck. To the other children, she announced, "Mitchie's going to marry me when I grow up. Then Bert will be mine too, just so you know." Mitch smiled to himself at the image of her beaming face. Mitch fishtailed his metallic gray Dodge Cummins pickup down the drive, spewing gravel. The truck lurched violently when the enormous tires hit pavement. His heart raced as the speedometer approached 90. Chest-high rows of corn alongside the road blurred into carpets of green. Speeding to a scene was the best part of being a volunteer firefighter for the small town of Milroy, Wisconsin. A half-mile from the Hillenbrand farm, Mitch could already see dense, black and gray columns of smoke rising over 2 tall silos, staining the blue sky. What smelled like a massive Saturday night bonfire flooded through the truck's air vents. Cold beads of sweat trickled down his spine. As the youngest member of the department, the only fires he'd fought were grass fires. Now he'd be first in at a major structure fire. Mitch rounded the corner to the Hillenbrand's farm. Smoke billowed from the second-floor windows of the white Victorian farmhouse. He skidded the truck to a stop, making sure to leave room for fire rigs. 12-year-old Lydia Hillenbrand ran to him from the side of the house, her straggly red hair flying in all directions. Mitch sprang from the truck. Lydia clutched his arm, her body trembling, gasping for breath. "I can't find Maggie." I think my time's up.
Thank you so much, Greg, and congrats on the novel.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see, we're getting short on time. We have about 15 minutes left, and we have 3 more readers, so I think we can do this. Christine Wentz, I hope I'm pronouncing your last name right. Are you still there, Christine? I see your name on screen. Maybe I'll come back to you. Victoria, are you ready?
Hi there, can you hear me?
We can.
Great, I'm Victoria Noe. I'm a nonfiction writer and speaker and activist in the AIDS community. I've been in and out of the AIDS community for 35 years. My most recent book is about the contributions of straight women in the AIDS community that had not been recognized before, but that's not what I'm writing. I apologize for the lighting. This is my third webinar today, and I feel like I've grown roots into this chair today, but next time the lighting will be better. What I'm going to read is actually something that I posted on my blog a few weeks ago, and in keeping with the strangeness theme, this is about the epidemic now and why it's so strange to some of us. I'm not sure what the first trigger was. It might have been a picture of medical personnel dressed in spacesuits to protect them from their patients. It might have been the word pandemic. It might have been other people will get this virus, not me. It might have been the recommendations that counters and doorknobs be wiped down with disinfectant. It might have been a Republican president indifferent at best to the suffering of those whose lives he did not consider important. It might have been the insistence of many people to carry on their lives as usual, no matter the consequences of their actions. At the beginning of March, I thought I was the only person who felt a persistent, nagging sense of deja vu. The beginning of the AIDS epidemic was almost 40 years ago. The coronavirus pandemic is not the same, a frequent topic of heated discussions on Facebook. But there were enough similarities that those of us who remember those dark days are now experiencing waves of grief and, yes, anger. Do you think your experiences in the AIDS community are affecting how you feel now? My therapist asked. My first reaction was, well, duh. One of the lingering behaviors from that period of time is that if I don't hear from a friend for a while, I assume the worst. Maybe they're not dead, but it's something really bad. It certainly comes from that time when people often disappeared, their names surfacing only when you saw their obituary in the Windy City Times or Gay Times paper. People died quickly then. The speed at which they died was stunning, though they were the lucky ones. Others lingered for months, in and out of hospitals where they were treated like lepers, sometimes dying alone. So 3 weeks ago, I started contacting every friend I knew all over the country who I hadn't heard from lately. A series of emails, texts, phone calls, Facebook messages assured me that all were alive and mostly well. Many of them have conditions that put them at risk if they contract this virus. 3, in fact, tested positive. 1 was hospitalized, though he's on the mend. I told my therapist that I fully expect that someone I know will die from this virus, maybe more than one someone. It might be one of those people who's already at risk. It might be someone who is otherwise healthy. That's the kind of surprise I fear the most. The whole world is grieving for the losses that mount each day along with the bodies. And as much as we try to pull together, and we have, it would be a mistake to ignore the sense of loss we feel. My therapist asked what I do when I'm triggered, now an everyday occurrence. I told her that I stop what I'm doing when I have these moments, these flashbacks. For too many years, I pushed those thoughts aside, buried them deep inside me, so that when they finally came out, I was overwhelmed. Now I acknowledge them and take a moment to remember that terrible time when my friends were dying and very few people cared. And then I shift gears. I do something else. I go for a walk, I do the laundry, I buy something online, I post links to resources my friends can use, anything that feels productive. The moment passes, but it's not ignored, because I learned the hard way that ignoring isn't healthy. I see a lot of my friends, long-term survivors in the AIDS community who are similarly triggered. They were the ones I reached out to first. I can't tell them how to deal with this because we all face grief and trauma in our own way. When this is over, and it will be over someday, we will all gather again to hug and kiss and dance like we always have for 40 years. We'll marvel at how we survived not one but two pandemics, and then we'll dance some more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Victoria. And do you want to just tell us what, you had a book come out last year, right? Or last
I did.
What was the title again?
It's called Fag Hags, Divas, and Moms, The Legacy of Straight Women in the AIDS Community.
Great. Thank you so
Thank
much. Okay, I think we might have lost Christine, so I'm just going to open it up for a last call. Maybe anyone else want to read? I know Arnie wants to read, and I'll just share that I am not sure. I think our time slot is set to end in 7 minutes. I don't know if it's going to automatically cut us off, so we'll find out. I'll let Arnie read, and then after Arnie reads, I will stop the recording and unmute everyone so that we can have kind of Q&A, and if people want to stay and chat for a bit, kind of have some fellowship after the reading. So with that, Arnie, I will unmute you. Unless you're unmuting yourself, I can't seem to unmute you.
So before I get started, Alta and I've been at this for almost 2 years. And the whole idea behind the ambassador program is to get, us out for, make it less New York centric, but, that we're all out here in the hinterlands wanting to get together and be writers together. And use the Authors Guild for what it was meant to be. Our terms are coming up in June in this very strange world, and we're looking for replacements, someone else to take the job. I'd be happy to mentor whoever wants to go in. I volunteered to extend myself to September for Printers Row anyway. So if any of you are interested, contact me, contact Alta. And we'll get you going. We need new blood. We need somebody else to do this. And you need somebody else to do this. You're getting bored with us.
I think everyone has our contact info, but just in case, I will put the Chicago chapter address in the chat. And I just want to put this out there, if I don't have time later. I've gotten so much out of serving this organization. As you can see, I've met a lot of different writers. It's just a really fun way to engage in the community. And I think, the Authors Guild is a national organization, but there's nothing to substitute for local sort of community. There are already so many literary communities here in Chicago. And I think we actually had one of our fellow Detroit chapter co-ambassadors.
Yeah, she was here. Yeah, she was here, and she left early. I'm actually talking to her tomorrow. They did a great thing in Detroit last week. Writing seminar that I actually was able to participate in, which was great.
So just to shake things up. So it's, and we look forward to both coming to future events as well. But Arnie, let's squeeze your reading in there.
Okay, this is something that I've been playing with. It was actually, I don't know if you could see, it was written on a typewriter. I have not edited or anything, so I'm just gonna jump right into this. As my parents told it, I was a baby in a hurry to get out into the world. My mother, well into her 9th month, woke up one spring morning and realized the time, my time, had come. She didn't nudge my father. She shoved him awake with all her might. I wasn't the beginning of contractions for a few hours to go. Mom knew right from the start that I was ready to break out and get going. Dad awoke from his grogginess state and went to the bathroom. He washed his face and started shaving. From the next room, my mother blasted a command that must have made Dad's blood run cold from fear. Gene, don't shave. They managed to throw a coat around Mom and get into the car. My grandmothers were respectively called before they left to let them know I was en route. This could have been a tragic error in timing. The trip to the hospital was about 15 minutes, normally. By the time they got in the car, just scant minutes after Mom's edict to my dad on shaving, she was in full-throated scream mode. Dad floored the gas pedal, pushing the Chevy to the limits. He was terrified himself, a soon-to-be father with a baby fighting to get out of the womb. Mom, by this point, was a mess, both physically and emotionally. Dad blew through stoplights, fully hoping, that a cop would pull him over and then the cop would take charge. There's never a cop when you need one, and so Dad's luck was bad this morning. He pulled into the emergency room driving lane and screamed for a doctor. What happened next in the story, as it was come down through the years, gets a little blurry. How did Mom get from the car into the emergency room? Who parked the car? Why was my grandmother back at her house fuming over what this monster had done to her own baby, barely 22? So young, now that I look at it. The last thing Dad saw was Mom on a gurney being rolled away. This was in the years prior to the modern methods of birthing, with fathers in the room coaching the mothers, while dolphins and unicorns sing in three-part harmony with a smiling anthropomorphic rainbow. At least that's what I've been told. To get back to cases, Mom was rolled off, a screaming mess, with them cutting her clothes off so she could get to business of birthing. Dad went to register my mom. They hadn't had time for checking in, handing over insurance cards, and all the usual business that visits to the hospital require. He went to the counter, where the attendant asked him, "Are you Mr. Bernstein?" "Yes," he replied. "Congratulations, you have a son." And so that's how the story goes. It was a fine spring day in the south suburbs of Chicago, April 20th, 1960, to be exact. That's actually was my birthday was Monday. But it's a larger thing I'm doing about the strangeness of the day of April 20th. And you can look that up on Wikipedia.
Thank you so much, Arnie. So I'd just like to thank our readers again, Larry, Marlene, Michelle, and Rebecca. I'm going to stop the recording now, and we'll see you all soon.